What's up, good people? Thanks for joining us on this rescheduled offensive line draft podcast. As you can see, we got our third member, our fifth Beatle, our three Musketeer, our whatever else, three Amigo, our third Amigo. The Billy Preston to our fifth Beatle here. Craig Smith is here, and he is going to be joining us every week from here on out on these draft shows. And as you know, Jamie and I have a grading system. Craig now is a part of that grading system. So as we go across these prospects, Craig's going to give his own grade. I'll give mine. Jamie will give his. So you got now a whole new outlook on this draft class with a whole new opinion from Craig. And we wanted to keep this thing fresh. So we brought Craig in, who's obviously now part of the Lightning Round team, if you had not heard. So if you're listening to this, just know that this is our third to last podcast on Bolts from the Blue. We've got two more, and then we're out. And if you're listening to this, you don't have to do anything new because we've got the feed switched over. You won't have to resubscribe or find us anywhere else. If you're looking at it right now, you'll see that it says Lightning Round Podcast instead of Bolts from the Blue. So that switch has been made, and we are all done. And we got a whole new perspective, as Edward said in the chat, from Craig. And just know that Craig, if you don't know Craig at all, this is not your consensus opinion. Jamie, Craig, and I all have our different opinions. We all have our different grades. We don't care how NFL.com ranks them or Bucky Brooks or Daniel Jeremiah or the Draft Network or anybody else. We have our own grades. We did them all individually. We haven't talked about it at all. So this will be a fun little exercise as we go through this draft season. So all that to say, Craig, welcome to the family. We appreciate you here. And man, we're fun. We're really glad to have you as part of this whole Lightning Round podcast family.
Oh, absolutely, guys. You know, I really appreciate you. Like I've said a million times since the decision came that, I really appreciate you guys inviting me on. Been huge fans and supporter. Listened again. It kind of dates me because now I'm realizing just how old I am because I gauge everything by my kids, especially my youngest. And I was with you guys before my 7-year-old was born. So, yeah, with that being said, I definitely am feeling a little older. But
you feel old.
But, this is why I work out so often because I have to appear younger than what I am. So that's the way that I trick myself. But okay. Needless to say, this is, and I've mentioned this on Twitter, it's a full circle situation for me. So really, really happy to be aboard and providing content and working alongside you fine gentlemen.
Yeah. And before we get into it, can you give us an answer to this, Craig? What's your 40 time since we're grading you?
Oh, man. You make me go back that far? All right. So honestly, now I don't know because I haven't run a 40 since I was in my early 20s, but the fastest I've ever run was a 4.4 flat. Now, you know what? I'm not going to do it to myself. 4.4 flat is the last 40 I ran, so that's what I'm sticking with.
Okay. Hey, look at you, man. I don't know that I ever hit that, ever. Jamie?
I definitely didn't. Definitely did not.
Oh, well, Craig, again, man, we love you. Thanks for joining us. And here's how we're going to do it, folks. So we're covering tackles today, guards, centers. We're going through the whole offensive line draft class. We've each been given the guy to talk about. And then, the other two guys will tag on and we'll just kind of have an open conversation here. And then at the end, we'll kind of give our grades and how our top 5 kind of shake out. And then we're going to move on to guards and centers. We're each going to give a sleeper. Jamie's going to give a tackle sleeper. Craig's going to give a guard sleeper. I'll give a center sleeper. And then we will grade the guards and centers together as interior offensive linemen. And if you've been part of it, you know how this goes. But that's kind of the refresher for anybody else who forgot, because last week was kind of a different kind of format where Jamie and I took separate groups. So let's just get on with it. We've got the top, I think, 6 tackles here on most people's lists, and we're going to cover all 6 and then some others. So let's start with in no particular order. The first one here on this list is Paris Johnson Jr. from Ohio State. Jamie, how'd you feel about him?
I liked him quite a bit. I thought he was a lot of fun to watch. He has a lot of traits that I think you look for in an offensive tackle. So if you're looking for, the top traits, the top strengths that he has, he's very smart. You can tell he's been well coached. Head's always on a swivel. Always looking for someone else to hit. Really understands how to create angles and seal off his man in the gap. Takes really smart angles to the second level. That's probably his greatest strength. He's also a really good athlete. He has basically gadget arms. I think his arms, if I'm not mistaken, are 36 and 3 inches long or something ridiculous like that. He basically doesn't have to move his feet at the line of scrimmage to get his hands on his man. And a lot of times he will use that length to his advantage. I love his ability to move as a run blocker. And I think he flashes a really strong punch. It's not consistent. It's something that needs some work. But you can see where with proper coaching, that punch is going to be pretty violent. And I think he's a guy who he projects as a starting left tackle for sure. From a weakness standpoint, I think he's pretty leanly built. He doesn't have the girth that a lot of offensive tackles do. You hear coaches talk about looking for guys with the bubble butt at the combine. He does not have the bubble butt. He's pretty narrow across the hips, pretty lean. I think you can also talk about, there's some struggles with power rushers. It flashed a few times here and there on tape. I think it's something that you'll see more at the next level. Pretty strong tendency to duck and lead with his shoulders and kind of lead into contact with his head and his shoulders. And he can struggle at times with twitchy, bendy edge rushers getting around the edge on him. Overall, I think he's a starting left tackle. I think he's got pretty high upside. You're probably talking Pro Bowl potential with that length and athleticism. There's a mean streak there. Lots of fun to watch.
And what was your grade?
My grade is an 87.
Boo! Man, we hit it right on the nose. Dang. All right. Yeah. Because a lot of people have this, has Paris Johnson as kind of the offensive tackle 1. And I had a hard time going through this and really pushing him up my board to a first round grade. I mean, he played guard for most of his career and he only had 13 total starts. So there isn't a ton of tape really on a left tackle traits. You got some obviously, but not a lot as a lot of these other guys that we're going to talk about, but he's only 21 and he's 6'6", 310. There's a little bit of projection there, which is part of the reason why he's not a first round grade in my mind. Same with the frame, same with kind of slow because he's so tall to get around those edge rushers who can duck under him. But the frame, the length, the footwork, the athleticism, you work on some of those techniques. I mean, you can really have probably a Pro Bowl caliber offensive tackle in a couple years. So yeah, I got an 87 here too, which is kind of a high mid-level grade, second round grade.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, we vary a little bit here. We're in the same neighborhood. But with that being said, I liked a lot of what I saw from Johnson as well. So he's pretty good at recovering if he gets beat off the ball initially. And his movement skills down the line of scrimmage to execute reach blocks and cut off defensive linemen is pretty nice. Actually, I was a little bit more surprised by that than I thought I would be going into the film. And I think right now he's probably a better pass blocker than run blocker. It's one of the complaints that I have a little bit about Ohio State. They didn't know what they wanted to be in the run game. It wasn't that they were multiple in that way. It's almost like they couldn't decide what to utilize, whether it was going to be power or zone concepts. And I think it kind of came to the detriment of some of the offensive linemen, Johnson being one of them. Another one I'm sure we'll get to later on, unfortunately. But again, he gets attached and he stays there. So you're not seeing very many instances where he's getting block shed really early. So just to not be overly redundant, because we have some of the same ideas about him, talking about some of the cons. So he's not as strong as, it was mentioned in his lower half as I thought he would be when I turned on the tape. His anchor kind of buckled against power, and I saw him on skates a few times, so not ideal. And he's got old man strength up top, but do you even leg day bro at the bottom? It's a little embarrassing. But I mean, overall, a very good tackle. To me, he's probably without not trying not to give away too much near the top of the class for me, and I have him graded at an 85.
Okay. Yeah, so you're in the neighborhood. Saw the same thing about power rushers though, man. he had his issues for sure.
That stands out when those guys when they get into his pads and they get up underneath him and he's late with his punch. He's definitely has the potential to be on his skates for sure.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. The next tackle here is the Northwestern tackle, which is Peter Skoronski. Skoronski actually took over for Rashawn Slater. He took over his freshman season, started 33 games at left tackle, 20 more than aforementioned Paris Johnson Jr. He's really technically sound as an offensive lineman, really smart, showed athleticism when he was in space in the run game and the speed to counter quick edge rushers. Footwork is really clean. It's fast. He explodes off the snap. And the anchor is strong against power rushers, which I saw a little bit difference between these two. The hand placement hits. He's really precise with his hands. Also packs some good punch. The two knocks for me. One is the play strength. He uses good hand placement and counter to slow down power rushers, but he's shown the ability to get kind of overpowered by some of those stronger pass rushers. Not as much, I think, as Johnson, but definitely an issue. And the other one, which is the biggest, is that he's really undersized for a tackle. He's short, he's light, and his arms are short. The NFL threshold for anybody watching is 34 inches for an NFL tackle. That's kind of the threshold most GMs are looking for in a tackle. Skoronski measured at 32.25. So in retrospect, Rashawn Slater, who teams were completely down on, and that's why he fell into the Chargers' lap, he was an inch below the 34. He was at 33, and this is even below that at 32.25. So most GMs, and myself included, want to put Skoronski at guard. But overall, Peter Skoronski is pretty polished, excellent athleticism, pretty clean footwork. Need to put some muscle on, put a little sand in his pants to thwart those power rushers, but he's a good football player. I got him at an 89, which is almost a first-round grade. I really enjoyed him. It's obvious that he's got a kick inside, but so I think he's a guard, and we'll put Skoronski as our interior offensive lineman list later on when we're ranking, but I've got 89 on Skoronski.
We differ on Skoronski. Okay. I liked him, but I think the thing that you mentioned that stuck out to me and it showed up over and over on the tape is the lack of length. It's something that I wasn't concerned with Slater, since you mentioned him, because Slater's technique was pretty much flawless. His hand placement was flawless. His timing was always on point. He always beat his man to the punch. So the length didn't matter. Skoronski carries his hands low, and he tends to be late with his punch. And you can see guys using that club move, using that rip move to soften the edge and get around him when he's late with his hands. And that's something that really stuck out to me. I do think, on the positive side, he's a guy who he's very intelligent. You can tell he's been well coached. He understands how to play his angles. More often than not, his hand placement is pretty solid. Footwork is great. He glides around the field. He can make blocks at all three levels of the field if asked to. He's versatile. I think he can play in a power scheme. He can play in a zone or a gap scheme. And he's got a nasty edge to him to finish blocks. Those are the things that I like about him. I think, I mentioned the lack of length. The timing and the placement of the punch is inconsistent because of the way he carries his hands so low. And I think there is a vulnerability to power, like you mentioned. I also thought that I saw some vulnerability to really twitchy inside counters that stood out to me. So I like Skoronski. I don't think he can play left tackle at the next level. I think he might be able to play right tackle. But like you mentioned, with those short arms, he's probably just about guaranteed to move inside. I have an 84 on Skoronski. So kind of a mid-second round grade.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit on the lower end too. I'll get to the grade here in a second. But for me, looking at Skoronski, the guy is pretty much the total package from movement and A+ processing and technique standpoint. So again, the arm thing is it's kind of a problem. So like I'm sure the phrase "your arms are too short to box with" guy probably feels like a personal attack for him. But 32 and a quarter ain't great. We heard this issue with Slater, a couple of years ago. So we've been through this song and dance about the length, but Slater's also probably stronger on the outside than Skoronski is as well. So outside of just the technique, we've all seen that video of Slater front squatting like over 450, which is unreal. But For me, he's probably still the best overall lineman in the class from an overall standpoint. He's a significantly skilled reach blocker. I saw some really good reps against defenders lined up in 4-eye. So for those that aren't, fully aware of 4-eye, that technique lines up to the inside shoulder of the tackle. So he did a really tremendous job at cutting those guys off. And, like Jamie mentioned, he's also a very effective outside and power run scheme guy. So there's your versatility. As far as the flip side of that, he's going to have a time, as mentioned, against some of the blue chip pass rushers in the league. Power guys, guys that are really, really quick to the edge, can get outside of him. His athleticism is pretty good, so he can recover well, but he doesn't have the best anchor. And much of that is probably due to him losing battles because of leverage. So those shorter limbs don't do him any favors. So with that said, for me, it's the arms that drive the actual grade down. For me, I have him at an 83 overall.
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah, I mean, they're an issue. I think overall you got a pretty polished offensive lineman, but I hear you guys. I hear you. So let's the third one on this list here, and Craig will take this one. It's Broderick Jones out of Georgia.
Yeah. So with Jones, sorry, technical issue. There we go. So with Jones, I like him. He's young and he's got a ton of upside. You can tell he's not a finished product. So his potential is there. He's nowhere near his ceiling. He's got less than 20 starts or had less than 20 starts at Georgia, one full season as a starter. He looks like he might be the most athletic tackle in the class. And he showed off that at the combine, running the fastest 40 of the offensive tackles. I think he ran a 4.97. But the more important side of that is that he had a 1.67 10-yard split, which is crazy. And we're talking the elite of the elites in that regard. So that's the really only part that matters in that particular run. But he's got that predator mindset. He gets off on finishing guys. It's borderline intimidating from some of the stuff that I saw. And there were reps where once he get leverage against power moves, he pretty much flattened defenders. And then you'd see like more finesse from them going forward because they didn't want to continue taking that risk. So we're making some business decisions there. Also love the way he mirrors defenders and pass protection off the line of scrimmage. So he also maintains a really, really wide base, which is important in that regard. And so he's got the potential to be one of these like 8 to 10 year tier 1 offensive tackles. He just needs a little bit more development. As far as some of the downsides, I think he also leans heavily on his athleticism as opposed to proper technique, which again, him being young and relatively new to the position affects him, or experience at the position, should I say. And there were a few reps that jumped out against Oregon last year where his footwork and angles were a little sloppy, but he's able to recover, so it doesn't look as bad as what it really was. And he has to work on matching his feet with his hands. More often than not, the hands lag behind the quickness of his feet, so he has to pair that up a little bit better. He could stand to get a little bit stronger. He can get pushed back a little. He recovers again nicely, but bull rushers were able to kind of get into his chest and push him a little, take a few steps back, and he'd reset. So, we're not talking about anything that was too big of a deal in pass protection. But another thing I noticed from Georgia is they ran way more RPO than what I remembered watching them live. And so you don't get to see as much of him in base pass pro as you would like. So there's a little bit more to prove in that regard too. So overall, I have him graded at an 82.
Craig and I are in a similar ballpark. I think there's a lot to like about him. Craig mentioned the athleticism. He's a former basketball player, probably the most athletic tackle or lineman in this class. He has the length you look for. He has great recovery speed around the edge. Even if he gets beat off a snap, he generally recovers and makes up ground and stays connected and is able to run his man around the pocket. And I think there's scheme versatility. I think because of his athleticism, because of his length, there's an opportunity for him to succeed in an outside zone scheme. He could succeed in a power scheme. He obviously played in an RPO scheme in college. So there's a lot of versatility there. I think from a weakness standpoint, there's a little bit of a tendency to bend at the waist and duck the head. And this is kind of a recurring theme with all the linemen in this class. He fires off the line of scrimmage low, but then he'll kind of pop up and he'll bend at the waist and duck his head and lead with his shoulders. The hand placement's a little inconsistent. It can be a little high and outside and get him in trouble at times. He does struggle with power runners. I think the play strength is a little bit average and probably still on the developmental side. And I think there is a mauling tendency there. He wants to just overpower guys, and I think that could lead to flags at the next level. But overall, I think he's a guy who has all the traits you look for. He's got the length. He's got the athleticism. He's mean. He finishes blocks. He does everything you want to. He moves with ease at all three levels. He just needs polishing. And I think, he's a guy who's going to play left tackle at the next level with the right scheme, with the right coaching fit, and some technical refinement. He's going to be really, really good. I have an 83 on Broderick Jones.
Yeah, we're in the same ballpark. I got 82. And the reason he didn't get a ton of snaps left tackle is because he was taken for the Chargers now left guard, Jamari Salyer at Georgia for that title run last year. So not another guy who didn't get a ton of looks at left tackle, but a guy that, is young. I think you guys mentioned the technique issues. He's obviously a really good mover. I think he struggles with his anchor a little bit too often too. But other than that, it seemed like throughout this past season, he improved with every snap. Even though he's raw in terms of his technique, he's good with his power, fluid in his hips. And it just seems like he's just starting to clip that ceiling. So a guy that has a really high ceiling in this class, there's not a lot of those. So this is a guy that doesn't have the size concerns, and you can put him at left tackle and in a couple of years could be a pretty good left tackle. So I got an 82, and we're all pretty much in that ballpark. Let's move on here. And Jamie, let's talk. You get the pleasure of talking about DeJuan Jones at Ohio State.
All right. So DeJuan Jones. So we'll start with the positives. He's huge. He's huge. He has really long arms. You can clearly see on the tape that when he lands his punch and times it well, his hands are very violent and disruptive. Not consistently so, but the potential is there for him to be that guy. He's, like I said, immense. He's got the width and the girth to run defenders around the pocket when they beat him off the line of scrimmage, and he relies on power to win. I think he is, he played a lot of right tackle at Ohio State. I think he started there for at least 2 years. I like the way that he's able to recover by using his width and his length. He kind of unwinds his wingspan and just runs guys around the edge when he gets beat, which is really helpful. I think the problem is that he's really reliant on his power, and he's another guy who likes to lean into blocks, and he's not super athletic. I'd say he's probably below average to average as an athlete.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
Especially in terms of this class, and that gets him in trouble. He can look clunky running at second and third level. He can look clunky and be kind of off time in terms of being a pulling guard. He has trouble covering ground. I think, contact balance can be an issue. When he's asked to move laterally, his feet can get tied up. If he just bumps into somebody, he'll fall over. He's very top heavy, and the feet are very heavy. And run blocking is not great. He's a leaner. He wants to lean on and kind of impose his size on people, but the technique isn't great. I think technique from a pass protection standpoint and from a run blocking standpoint needs a lot of work. He's a guy who I think could play right tackle at the next level. He's going to be developmental, got a chance to be a starter in the right system, probably needs to be in more of a downhill running scheme, not so much in an outside zone scheme. I have a late third round grade on him. I have a 73. There are some traits that I think teams might value. Obviously the size and the length, but the athleticism is a big problem. He's going to have to be hidden in the right kind of scheme and coached up really well to be successful.
Yeah. Everything you mentioned. It just, other than the body type and the heavy hands, the change of direction is an issue. Plays too high. The footwork is a big work in progress. When he's in the open field, he just looks like a big plotter, and he's making holes in the ground trying to get to the next line of defense. He kind of, to me, and I'm not a player comp, but in terms of how Jawan Taylor at right tackle was a liability his first year, improved a little bit. And then with each year, he developed and became a capable starting right tackle by the end of his contract. This kind of feels like that type of player to me. He's at least a year or two away from being able to even start in the NFL. And I agree. He's got to be in like some kind of power scheme. So I've got a 74, which is right next to you, Jamie. This is a 3rd round player who, quite frankly, is being mocked in the 1st round, early 2nd round. And that's just indicative of this offensive line class, really.
Yeah. So 3rd time's a charm. So, okay. Bright side. He moves okay for like a house. He's 6'8", 374, 36 3/8 inch arms, and 11 5/8 inch hands. So massive human being. Great. So you take that into consideration, and the fact that he's a plotter makes much more sense. So he essentially just kind of swallows defenders in the run game because of how massive he is. So he'll win with power. So of course, perfect for a power scheme. He'll use his length to widen rushers. I noticed that he did a really good job of that. Well, on occasion. And it bought Stroud some time in the pocket, or it also helped to create lanes for him to escape. So he does a pretty good job at picking up stunts, but it looks like that's more so due to the fact that he's essentially like a party bus with legs. So he can just be stationary. He doesn't have to move. He can just sit there, and whoever loops around can't avoid him. So essentially, it's just by way of being just a massive human being. Yeah. I mean, of course, we got the cons. He's not scheme diverse. So it's going to be a power, a gap, right tackle through and through. I read that there may be some questions about his passion for football. Apparently, like, he's a basketball guy at heart, and he picked football because basketball just wasn't working out. So there's that. You have to question that. His potential weight could be an issue. There were reports that it fluctuated anywhere between 20 and 30 pounds. So that's always going to be an issue. Maintaining weight will probably have to be like clauses in his contract for things like that. And the technique is super shoddy. Again, it's another one of these players where the hands and feet don't work all that well together. And it's probably no fault of his own because, I mean, that big, that massive of a human being is going to have issues moving their feet and being very swift. So that said, he got a 74 from me, and I feel like that was being kind of generous.
74, is that what you said?
Yep, 74.
Yeah. Okay. So we're, same with me, and Jamie's right below.
I promise, guys, we don't talk about this beforehand. we really don't.
In fact, it's a nice segue to our next guy, who's Darnell Wright. In full disclosure, he wasn't on our list to start when we sent out this list of guys to watch. And then I realized we kind of had a pretty bad omission here with Darnell Wright. And then I had watched these guys. They hadn't yet. And I said, good luck with DeJuan Jones, and Darnell Wright's a nice little palate cleanser because not as bad. He wasn't terrible, but a guy that obviously is our least favorite of the group so far. Darnell Wright actually improved the watch as we moved on with these guys. So Darnell Wright played left tackle, right guard in his college career. He's probably going to be a right tackle in the NFL in my mind. Really long arms with good hands at the end of them. Probably has the best snatch technique of the guys I watched of these tackles, and has some of the most powerful hands in this class too. I also love that something that I picked up while watching Darnell Wright. I don't know if you guys saw this too, but he liked to mess with his timing a little bit with his hands just to throw defenders off just a little bit. It's not always hitting at the same time. Sometimes he'll take a split second or fire out faster at other times. And you could tell with pass rushers that were trying to kind of clock his timing down, it kind of threw him off a little bit. But he's also very smart, plays with good leverage in the run game. He's a finisher too, definitely a guy who likes to play to the whistle and try to bury guys. He's got a pedigree too. He went up against some of the college's best pass rushers, and he held his own, which was very impressive. The struggles for me, his feet and pass pro are hit and miss. Like Craig's been talking about, it doesn't quite match the hands with the feet. And the other issue is the eye level. It just seems like he would dip down. Jamie had talked about how some guys get down and they come up. He would constantly, and they talk about with offensive linemen a lot, changing your eye direction. If your head's moving and bobbing, you're not able to track the guy in front of you because your eye level is changing. It's always got to stay the same. And he had a hard time tracking down guys when he kind of got up too fast or bobbed his head too much. So the other thing with Wright is he's just about an average athlete. A lot of these guys are some good athletes. I would say he's average, a little bit above average maybe, but with his shortcomings, Darnell Wright is a guy that really made up for it with his technique, the size, the length. As a right tackle, the footwork can kind of be masked a little bit. And I think the floor is pretty high with a guy like Darnell Wright with some room to grow. I've got an 88 on him, which is a high second round grade. How'd you guys feel?
I liked him too. I had a similar grade. I'm a little lower, but similar grade. I think, there were some areas in his game where he showed some strong awareness. He'd win with a one-arm punch. He'd win with a two-arm punch. You could see him feeling out the edge and the B gap, one with each arm. And there were many, many reps where he would actually block two guys, one with each arm, which was pretty impressive. The punch it almost causes convulsions when he lands it properly. I mean, he hits guys and their body just quits. And they hit the ground. He decleated some guys with his punch. That's how strong his hands are. And he's got a nasty streak. He likes to finish blocks. If you try to duck underneath him, you better watch out because there's a pretty good chance he's going to wind up on top of you and stick you 6 feet under. He is very mean, very physical, and he's always in control. He never looks really rushed to me. Looks like a guy, his hands and feet are calm. Like I mentioned, uses a variety of tools in the pass pro, uses the long arm, uses the physical punch. The feet are good. The hands are good. I like the core strength for a guy his size. He's able to slide and mirror really well in pass protection. And he's got a really, really good anchor against the power rush. I mean, you really can't bull rush him at all because of how strong he is. He comes off the ball low. There is still a tendency to pop up and duck his head at times, like a lot of the guys in this class. The hand placement is a little bit inconsistent, and he can be a little bit slow to recognize twists and blitzes. But I think from a traits perspective, he's got pretty much everything you're looking for. I have an 85 on him, so still mid second round grade, not quite as high as Garrett, but still pretty high.
Interesting. So I'm a fan of Darnell Wright. So in big bold letters, I have soul snatcher because that's what happens when he gets his hands on guys. And it's like Jamie said, that punch is ridiculous. Believe it or not, there's a path for me to him being probably even a potentially better guard than there is a tackle at the next level. I know it might sound a little weird, but just from the way that he plays, I know that traditionally right tackles in the past have been kind of more the guys that you want to be strong in the run game, and they kind of have that nasty demeanor. He has that, but you want him playing in tighter spaces because he's not the most fleet of foot. So you want to keep kind of his, his movement in a limited, more in a phone booth area because he can get beat to the outside. His length and strength helps him there. But man, I'm imagining him as a guard, and I think he would be tremendous there. I think he could take it up a notch if he were to make the move, but I think he'll be fine at tackle. Again, once he latches on, that's it. Defenders should just focus on surviving and conserve energy for the next rep. I have a nickname for him already, and for me to have a nickname, you got to be special. So for me, his name is DBG, Down Block Gangster, because his down blocks are disgusting. I'm not an offensive line guy. I could watch Darnell Wright play every day just because of the tremendous effort and the power that he plays with. Literally, I think at the next level, if he stays at tackle, he'll be fine at right tackle for years to come. Or if he makes the move where someone feels like he'd be better at guard, he'll be probably even more successful there. Again, as far as some of the cons go, he might actually be better suited to play on the inside with tighter splits where he can really take advantage of his power. He does struggle against athletes on the edge a bit because he can be, or he is a little stiff. And he's definitely more of a traditional right tackle. You probably don't want him protecting anyone's blind side consistently. But overall, I really liked him. I like his demeanor. I gave him also an 85.
Man, I wrote something down and I didn't say it because I thought it wouldn't fly over. But with Darnell Wright, when he gets hands on guys, I wrote down, it feels like when you get in the grasp of a gator in that gator roll, like you're not getting out and he's going to drown you. That's what Wright felt like. So that's something I wrote down too. And maybe I'll call him Gator and you can call him DBG and we'll have our own nickname. But it sounds like this is a consensus lightning round podcast stamp of approval for our tackles, but we're not quite there yet. So last one on this list is the kid out of North Dakota State, Cody Mauch.
So for Cody Mauch, I was not as much of a fan as I thought I might be. I'm probably a lot lower on him than a lot of people are. He is very athletic, which definitely works in his favor. There is a nastiness to his game, particularly in as a run blocker. He likes to finish his blocks. He likes to stick guys in the ground, which does make him fun to watch. He is very, very good at the second and third levels. Very fluid, takes smart angles, is able to locate moving targets, and he finishes his blocks at the second and third levels. All very good things. I think for me, the biggest thing, lack of length. We talked about Skoronski being 32 and a quarter inches with his arms. Mauch is 32 and 3/8, so not a whole lot longer. He's also timing and placement of his punch is inconsistent, and it has a lot to do with his punch, or with his length, excuse me. Tends to be high and wide. He can get grabby, can tend to wrestle with guys, particularly in pass protection. And I think that grabby tendency will probably draw flags at the next level. And he pass protects on his heels. If you watch him against power, his heels click against the ground, and he will get knocked over at times. So I don't think he can be a tackle at the next level. I think because of the length, because of his athleticism, because of the way he pass protects, I think he has to be inside. Somebody might try him at right tackle. I definitely would not put him at left tackle. I think as a guard in a zone blocking scheme, he could even succeed in a power blocking scheme because of how nasty he is in the running game. He would be really good. I have an 80 on Cody Mauch, which is a late second round grade. I would not want to be the team that takes him in the first round thinking that he is a left tackle of the future. Not even convinced he's going to be a right tackle of the future. So I'd be careful about how highly you draft him. I think there are some things that stood out. He didn't really have to protect a lot of traditional pockets in college. There were a lot of bootlegs to the right, a lot of RPO, a lot of design quarterback keepers. The quarterback was not holding the ball very long. Even when they were throwing the ball, there were a lot of short passes or the deep passes were out quickly. He did not have to protect for very long, and he got a lot of help. There was a lot of help from tight ends and fullbacks chipping. I think if you put him on an island on the left side, he's going to have a lot of problems, and he might even have problems on the right side.
Yeah. I was gonna mention that too. It's like North Dakota State runs so much read option and RPO, a lot more than I remember, that it's like you're not really seeing a ton of true left tackle pass sets very much in every game. So he's kind of a tough read. What about you, Craig? What was your grade on him?
So for Mauch, or I'm probably butchering his name, even though I heard it pronounced Mauch. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually a little bit lower. As a tackle, I have him rated as a 77. If he were a guard, he'd be an 80. Mm-hmm. So just kind of looking at where he's probably going to be better served is definitely going to be on the inside. To me, he's a really nasty run blocker with good feet. He's looking to punch a hole through you, not just displace you. But even though his game isn't really predicated on that, he still plays like someone with bad intentions. So you have to love the effort. He was a former tight end, I believe. So that explains the really good footwork and why he's been able to make it work at tackle. But I mean, and then there's also the fact that he looks like a possible descendant of Jed Clampett with the missing front two teeth. I mean, I'm with it. If that's your thing, man, just, brand yourself, keep it moving. But
I was thinking Cletus from Simpsons, but go ahead.
Nah, that works. I'm an early millennial, so I'm sure I just dated myself once again. But as far as the negatives go, it's much of the same. The length there is an issue, or lack thereof. So he has more of a guard's temperament also. He's probably better suited predominantly in zone-based concepts. So though he did play tackle, there's the versatility in the fact that he did it, but I also don't think that he's going to be very successful on the outside. So his home's probably got to be on the inside guard.
Yeah, I'm at 81, so I'm just right there with you guys. And he's not a left tackle. He played some guard and center. I think he's an interior offensive lineman in the NFL. I think what teams are going to bank on is the fact that he's got his gauge pinned at 100 every single time. And you're going to love the attitude. He's got a ton of he's got a really, really big personality. You can tell on the field and off the field. So, outside of that, and the fact that he's played in a lot of different offensive schemes, and they've done a lot of different things. And with the athleticism and power, he's going to have to refine some things. I think he'll need some time to develop as a dependable starter, but he's going to be a team favorite in the locker room. No doubt about that. With the missing tooth and the belly out. So I've got an 81, another guy who's being mocked in the first round, and we're all low second. So let's go with the sleeper here, Jamie. Out of the tackles, who's a guy that may be good for the Chargers, or some guy that has some good traits?
So, if you're looking for a developmental sleeper, somebody who has specific traits that you want, who you can develop, maybe start him out slowly as a swing tackle, and hopefully develop him into something more, I went with Wanya Morris from Oklahoma. Morris is a guy who has all the traits that you look for. He's extremely long. I think his arms are almost 36 inches long. Very athletic, has a really good punch, very nasty demeanor. The downside is pretty much everything else. He's very, very raw. Extremely raw. The hand placement is kind of all over the place. The feet can be kind of disconnected from the hands, like we've talked about with some of these guys. Because he's so long, he can rely on lunging and leaning a little bit too much and reaching, and the technique just needs a whole lot of work. But if you're in a position where you're in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, somewhere in that neighborhood, and you're looking for a guy who you want to come in and maybe compete with a swing tackle that you're not so sure about.
Foster Sorrell, you can name him.
Foster Sorrell.
Say his name.
and you're trait driven, like we know the Chargers are. Mm-hmm. I think Morris is a guy who would make a lot of sense for the Chargers. I have a 71 on him, which is a late 3rd, early 4th round grade. He's probably going to last a lot longer than that because of how raw he is. You can probably get a guy like him in the late 4th, early 5th round, but there's so much there to work with. If you believe in your development and you believe in your offensive line coach and you want somebody to maybe be ready in 2 years, maybe say your starting right tackle doesn't live up to his contract or something along those lines, then Morris is a guy who makes a lot of sense because you can take your time with him and he doesn't necessarily have to be on the field right away.
I watched Morris, and it's all about the athleticism. Bank on the athleticism. Hope he can develop into a backup tackle. I've got a late 4th on him, but I watched him too. It's athlete. You got to, as you'll see, and Steven just said here, doesn't sound like a great tackle class. Glad we're not in the market for starters. Absolutely. Yeah. Boy, are we a little sigh of relief after watching these tackles. Glad that they re-signed Trey Pipkins.
And it's not just the tackle class that's a problem.
No. We'll get to that too. But yeah, man, after that, it's a dart throw for a lot of these other guys. So let's move on to guards. And the first one here on our list is Osiris Torrance. And we'll talk more. Oh, you want to go over a top 5? You guys got a top 5 or a top 6?
Yeah. We could do that.
Not including Skoronski or Mauch, who's going to be in guard. I'll go ahead and start. At number 5, I've got the Syracuse tackle Matthew Bergeron at number 5. I got DeJuan Jones at 4, Broderick Jones at 3, Paris Johnson Jr. at 2, and Darnell Wright ended up grading out as my top tackle by 1 point.
I'm going to give you. I didn't have time to do to dig too deep, so okay. I'm just going to give you my top tackles of the guys that we watched.
Yeah.
So let's see here. So we'll go number 5 is Wanya Morris, my sleeper. Number 4 is DeJuan Jones at 73. Number 3 is Cody Mauch. Oh, I'm sorry, he's a guard. We're not going to go there.
Broderick Jones, if I remember correctly.
Number 3 is Darnell Wright with an 85. No, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Broderick Jones. Jones with an 83. Darnell Wright with an 85 is number 2, and Paris Johnson is number 1 with an 87.
Okay. Craig?
Yep. So pretty similarly, of the guys that we watched and discussed so far, I have DeJuan Jones. So for me, it's 4. I don't have a sleeper for tackle.
Yeah, that's okay.
So DeJuan Jones, it's 74. Then at 3 is Broderick Jones. And I mean, they're both at 85, so it's a tie. But if I want to just go ahead and place it by who I think takes tops there, I'm going to have Darnell Wright at number 2 and Paris Johnson at number 1.
Okay, so I'm the only one with Wright as number 1. Okay, and you guys both have Paris as number 1. All right, so moving on to guards. The first one here, like I mentioned, Osiris Torrance out of Florida. He played both right and left guard in the 4 years there at Florida. He uses wide frame to wall off defenders. He's got a squatty figure that helps him anchor real well and gain leverage. He's a tough guy to move off his spot. Torrance plays with incredible play strength, but at his size, he's not very agile in the open space. Osiris Torrance is perfectly made for a power running scheme where he can drive defenders with his play strength, move people in close spaces. Even though he wins with his size, he might need to cut a little bit of weight to improve that lateral agility. But I've got a low second round grade on Torrance. I've got a 81 on him. Greg?
Yeah. So I actually like Torrance a bit. For me, some of the things I noticed that he looks like he thoroughly enjoys dominating off the line of scrimmage. He's definitely a people mover. He anchors down in pass protection like a fully stocked, like old school deep freezer. So like, good luck getting him to budge. You're definitely not getting into the club. If you're like an interior guy and your one trick is bull rushing, then hopefully you kind of carved up the night before the game, because you're going to expend a ton of energy and you're probably not going to get very far with him. He has all the tools to develop into like a high-end guard for a power gap-heavy offense. As far as some of the downside, he's definitely not the most nimble guy, but his frame also doesn't suggest that he would be. He's another very linear player. So like you want him aligned, again, in tighter splits inside, because east and west movement ain't really his bag. It isn't terrible, but still not something you want him doing consistently. And, again, think he's a really good player. And as far as the grade goes, I have him ranked with a 74.
I'm a lot closer to Craig than I am to you with Torrance. So the things that I liked about him, you guys mentioned, there's pretty good awareness there. He recognizes and adjusts to stunts and twists, keeps his head on a swivel, always looking for more work. He's really good as a pass protector when he can square his guy up and stay in front of him. Once he gets his hands on them, it's usually over. Very nasty demeanor. Like Craig mentions, he loves to finish. He likes to dominate people, stick them in the ground. He generates movement in the running game, which is a positive. And I think the hand placement and timing is usually pretty strong. In terms of negatives or weaknesses, he's not a great athlete, in my opinion. He tends to lunge into his blocks at times. Almost all of his power comes from his upper body strength. There isn't a lot of bend or in his legs. There isn't a lot of leg drive. It's just him leaning on people and driving them out of the gap with his arms and his upper body. And I think like Greg mentioned, he's very good in a linear when he can move forward. Once people get his edge, he's pretty much done. It's really hard for him to catch up once people get to his edges. I have a early fourth round grade on him. I have a 68.
Where are you, Craig?
I had him at a 74.
Woo! And Jamie giving Craig his own new name like he gave me.
I said Craig.
You said Greg.
I said Craig.
You just called him Greg, and you're calling me Derek.
No, it just
happens
came out
all the time. That's fine. It's okay.
Also, Craig,
I called him Craig.
Sounds closer to Craig than Derek does to Garrett. So.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's just a change of a letter. I realized I just took your guy, Craig. My bad. You're supposed to talk about him.
No worries.
All right.
Teamwork.
All right. So, Jamie, this is definitely yours. Let's talk about Steve Avila.
Yeah, so Steve Avila, versatile. He's played center and guard, left guard mainly for TCU. Things that I like about him, because he's played center, he's very aware, very smart. He creates smart angles to seal off his man in pass protection and in the run game, adjusts well to changing rush responsibilities, plays with a really nice combination of athleticism and power. Love the power, love the punch. He's really good at the second level, also very effective as a pulling guard. He's more of a screener and a sealer in the run game than he is a people mover, in my opinion. He'll find the angles, he'll get around somebody, turn them out of the lane, but he's not really somebody who's going to drive people off the line of scrimmage on a regular basis. I think he's probably best suited to playing in his own blocking scheme. He can play too tall at times. He's vulnerable to inside counters, and the hand placement is kind of hit or miss. I have a 76 on Avila, which is kind of a mid to early third round grade. But he seems like a guy who'd be a good fit if you're looking for a versatile interior lineman to develop as either a guard or a center over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I like him in inside zone. I don't know. I think with, even though he's kind of got mid-level athleticism, which I think hurt him in space, I love his footwork. I love that he plays with a wide base, strikes hard. Like, his feet are just pounding into the dirt. It feels like he's leaving footprints. And so I'm a little bit higher. I've got an 81 on him too, actually. I'm a fan of him, played both guard and center, but I think he's just a guy I love. He's always the low man. He's always playing low, and I love his footwork. So I'm a little bit higher on him. Greg, where do you stand?
Yeah, so I mean, it's weird because he's a little over 6'3", like 330 pounds. So you would expect more of a brute. He does strike and play really hard with some power, but he has surprisingly nimble feet for such like a widely built mass of a human being. He does look to finish every block. I've seen him play through the whistle on numerous snaps, so the effort's there. He's not lacking for that at all. Even though he displays a little bit of movement, I wouldn't consider him to be laterally quick whatsoever. I'd say he's probably more linear than a lateral mover, even though he has the ability to move east and west. But I also question his processing just a little bit. Inside games and stunts can throw him for a loop from time to time. And the other downside to me is I believe he's like 23 years old, so he's a little bit older than what you would like. And I have him graded at a 71.
Wow. So we're pretty far off on these guards. I like it. I like it a lot. All right. So Craig, you got the sleeper for the guard class, and I stole Torrance from you. So you get to make it up here. Who you got on the inside? Who's your sleeper?
All right. So I kind of went back and forth between two guys, but I'm going to roll with, and I guess technically this doesn't make him a sleeper because the Chargers actually met with him. So people are aware. So Juice Scruggs from Penn State. So a couple of things. 6'3", 301, so decent size for the inside, particularly if you were looking for him to play some center, which he can do. He's got 33 and a quarter inch arms, 10 and a quarter inch hands. He had a 98.3 pass blocking efficiency rating last year. He does a pretty good job at shooting his hands and staying attached. He led the team in total snaps this year, or last year, should I say. So he proved himself to be really reliable where durability is concerned. And he's got good versatility, played center while at Penn State, but also produced some solid reps at guard at the Shrine Bowl. So he can be a little bit of a swing guy for you at guard, and he can play some center and he can play some center, play guard in a pinch, whatever you want to use him. He's going to be an interior offensive lineman. So as far as the downside, some cons, he can appear a little stiff. He shows very little hip flexibility. So that's kind of going to hurt him again a little bit as far as movement is concerned, especially against guys who are quicker on the interior. He's not a plus athlete, and it shows when he has to move laterally or adjust to pick up stunts and twists. So for me, I had Juice Scruggs with a 68.
I watched him, and this is just like with Jamie and Morris. It's like bank on the athleticism and hope he can survive inside. I'm a little bit lower than you on him. I got a 58, but I get it, man. He's got all the athleticism you want, and if you can unlock that, he'd be a really good addition for sure. All right, well, let's move on to center. We got two more here, and then I'll do a sleeper, and then we'll answer your questions here. I know people are asking about drafting an offensive lineman. We'll get into that in just a minute. So first up, John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota. JMS is built for the trenches at 6'3", 301. Definitely looks the part. His best trait is his play strength in my mind. Strong hands to grab and lock. Uses hands to torque defenders in the run game and pass game. Served as a captain on the offense, calling out assignments pre-snap. Really handled himself well with the stunts up front. So he's a smart kid. Does his best work as a run defender. He's a finisher. In the pass game, the timing of the hands and feet could really improve. He actually took, in my mind, a step back in his progression this season compared to last. Watched a tape of last season 2 years ago was pretty impressive. This past season, he looked like he had some technical issues, issues with the hands, issues with the balance. The other thing that teams are going to ding him for is the lack of arm length. For a center, the team's threshold are 34 inches, and JMS is just over 32 and a half. So short arms and below average athleticism. And he's going to be 24 years old when he hits the field. So, there's a lot of stuff going against him, but he's got the play strength, the high football IQ. He's a finisher. I think the ceiling is low, but I think the floor is pretty high for a guy with this kind of experience. And I think he could probably help out pretty soon. I've got a 79 on him, which is a high third.
I'm in a similar area on him. I liked the awareness. You mentioned he called the protections and adjustments for the offensive line in Minnesota, which not a lot of these centers did. I think he's not a great athlete, but he possesses really good lateral and short area quickness for zone and reach blocks, which is a good thing. He has the footwork and the core strength to slide and mirror when he squares up his man and stay in front of him. And he has a really solid anchor thanks to a flexible lower half. The awareness, the athleticism are good. I like the footwork and I like the anchor. From a negative standpoint, the punch is pretty inconsistent. He's almost strictly a catcher. He's not really a puncher. He'll double underhook and latch on to guys, but he's not really jolting anybody with his hands like some of the other guys in this class are. I don't know if you guys noticed it. I noticed trying to get to second level, there's a hitch in his gait. He almost looks like he's galloping at times. Kind of weird looking. He has a tendency to lunge. I think he's probably going to be a starting center in an outside zone scheme. I have a 76 on him. He's a guy who I'd be looking for late third, early fourth. If you're looking for, a developmental center or interior lineman in the future, he's a guy who fits that mold and has a lot to offer.
He's going to go higher than that, but yeah, that's where I would take him too. Craig?
Yeah. So for me, Schmitz seems like he has pretty decent functional strength. I think he put up about also 26 reps of 2 1/4 at the combine. So that's fine. I mean, that doesn't always translate to on the field, but I did see pretty decent strength on tape. As far as the processing goes, he might be the best in the interior offensive line in the class. I like his anchor and pass protection. He's really stout, that build, 6'3", 300 pounds. So that plays a part in it. He does a pretty good job. Now, I know Jamie said when he works up to the second level, yes. But as far as like catching pressure from the second level, like blitzing linebackers, everything like that, he does a pretty good job picking up in that scenario. But from a movement standpoint, I do see what you were talking about. I think he only played center, but he looks like he has, again, that processor and intelligence to play guard if necessary. Garrett already mentioned this 24-year-old rookie. So there's that. And I also think he can play a little high, might be picking nits a little bit. But I think he can maybe play a little gap or inside zone also. So there might be a little bit more versatility there than what I initially thought. But, I agree, probably do some outside zone as well. And for the grade, I have him at an 82.
Oh, look at you. This is the first time you're higher on a player than the rest of us.
Yeah, I get to be the good guy.
All right. Last one here on this list. Craig, you're going to take it. I'm not going to steal this one. Joe
Thank you, sir.
Tippmann out of Wisconsin.
Yeah, so 6'6". So at normally large for a center as far as height is concerned. It's not typical, but a really easy mover, surprisingly. I think he only gave up 1 sack in 2 years at Wisconsin, but you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt. We all know Wisconsin is a run-first team, so the snaps are kind of going to be a little skewed. I think he's a fit for gap or zone schemes due to his blend of athleticism and strength. He gets out in space pretty well as a puller, which is pretty impressive for a guy his size, and he also takes pretty solid angles. Watching defenders in the secondary attempt to avoid him in space is pretty funny. There's almost no getting around him. You can kind of see them running for their lives, trying to find a way around him. And Wisconsin, actually, I believe their run scheme itself was probably predicated upon Tippmann and his abilities. So I believe the reason why they ran a lot of the outside zone stuff that they did was because they had him in the middle. He's a pretty easy plug and play starter. You can kind of take him out of the wrapper and roll him out there day one. I think you can pencil him in. As far as some of the cons, his height can be a disadvantage because it takes him, it makes it a little bit difficult for him to get lower than the defender. He can also be late with his hands, so defenders can get into his pads first and win with leverage against them. Also, a common theme here, as Jamie mentioned, he's a waist bender a little bit, so I question his flexibility. And he can find himself overextended and off balance because of that. He might be better at the second level than off of the line of scrimmage because it takes him a bit to uncork. And I think that has a lot to do with his height. So as far as the grade goes for Tippmann, I have him at an 80.
I'm higher. I like Tippmann a lot, man. Even though to me, he feels like the best pulling center in this class in my mind. I watched a bunch of centers and this kid really good at the second level, and he collects combo blocks like crazy, always finding work. But I mean, I agree with you. I think because he's 6'6", there's some issues with him getting a little too high. But I also think he works it to his advantage by gaining leverage a lot at the line of scrimmage with that height. So, I think there's going to be some technical refinement because of the size, but just to make sure that he doesn't get too high and also keep his hands inside because he does keep it outside sometimes. But he's smart, one of the better athletes in this interior class, probably the best pulling center in my mind. Played in a few different systems. And like you mentioned, unrolling him, putting him out there, he's a plug and play center day one. I like him. I've got an 84 on Tippmann.
I'm lower on Tippmann than both you guys.
Oh, dang.
I like the power. He's huge, wide and powerful. Does a good job of keeping his head on a swivel. Made the calls for the line on Wisconsin, which is good. Good anchor and pass pro. Pretty hard to move. Generally pretty successful once he latches on. Generates a lot of movement in the running game, but it's generally with upper body more so than with leg drive. Good enough athlete, I think, considering his size. Not a great athlete, but a good athlete. The feet are calm, patient in his kick slide. Some ability to slide and mirror. Isn't super flashy. I like him as a puller. I didn't think he was super explosive, but he is effective as a puller. Lacks ideal length. Almost always starts the rep the same way. Stands upright, ducks his head, and leans in with his shoulder. This can lead to some balance issues with IDL who play with good leverage. He's strictly a catcher, almost always late and high with his hands, and he doesn't pack the punch that you'd expect. I had a 70 on him.
Oh, wow.
You weren't joking.
No, you're way, man, a round and a half lower than me. Woo-wee. No, wait, 84? Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
All right, so let's finish this off. My turn for a sleeper, and the one I picked was Luke Whippler at Ohio State. Got to see him with Paris and Broderick on the line, and the reason I picked him is because this is, to me, the perfect fit for the Chargers. He's a real smooth mover. He's athletic, getting to the second level, consistent starter while only being 21 years old. He had 26 starts in that time, over 1,700 snaps, only gave up 1 sack. He was the captain of the O-line with great awareness. He will fall down some teams' boards because of the arm length. He's got 31.5-inch arms, which is small, and he's also light. He's at the 303 pounds, but this is a perfect fit for me for the Chargers. He isn't being mentioned until the end of round 3, start of day 4. He's young with a really high ceiling, so the Chargers can develop him. He can sit behind Lindsley, let him bulk up for a year or two. You can build off that athleticism, the experience, the smarts. And he was the center in Ohio State's system. He was successful in the number 1 ranked scoring offense. So he's got some experience with a very successful offense. And then also the Buckeyes have been known to turn out some pretty successful centers, including the Chargers' current center, Corey Lindsley. So, to me, this is just a perfect match. Luke Whippler should be the guy earliest at round 3, probably day 4, maybe even 5. Can be a starter down the road once Lindsley's out. You can bank on a lot of some really good intangibles and some traits, work on getting them in a weight program. I've got a 69 on him, which is a low 3rd, high 4th, but that's about where you can start to get this guy. And to me, moving on to the question from Chargers 4521 or Charger 4521, earliest round, the Chargers should address O-line. What do you guys think?
I don't think they should be addressing the offensive line until the 4th round. I think they have more pressing needs, guys who are going to be on the field much more quickly and have a chance to contribute much earlier. And I would not, even if it's a backup center, a developmental future center of the future, I would not be taking an offensive lineman until the 4th round. I don't think it's a smart use of draft capital with the needs they have at wide receiver, tight end, edge, even corner. I think there are just more pressing needs elsewhere for guys who will be on the field much sooner.
What about you, Craig?
I'd push it possibly even an additional round, just like Jamie mentioned, when you're looking at some of the needs. And of course, we don't know what's going to happen quite yet in between now and the draft. And even, after, it wouldn't really matter because they would only be addressing what they'd still need at that point. But absolutely. And I would be probably looking more so towards the interior, potentially someone to be a Corey Lindsley replacement in the next couple of years if you want to groom them. So if that's in the middle rounds, that's fine. But I probably wouldn't look definitely no earlier than the 4th, but I may even wait until the 5th for interior guy.
Yeah, I agree with you. And in terms of a tackle, I mean, forget that's the end of day 3. That's a flyer on a guy. To me, it's who can replace Corey Lindsley, and that's at earliest the 4th. You look at wide receiver, tight end, and linebacker, and now even free safety are staring you in the face, and you got big holes in that roster.
And corner.
I'm looking at, if you look at on paper, corner while being still a need, you've got Kenneth Murray in your starting linebacker core. Joshua Palmer has not proven to be a real good wide receiver 3 right now. They still need a speed option. Gerald Everett, while he did okay last year, they could definitely improve in that regard. And you don't want JT Woods or Alohi Gilman on the field at free safety. So in my mind, those are the 4 biggest needs, and you're now in the 5th round at that point if you address those 4 up front. So yeah, I mean, center right now, I still think they have work to do in free agency, but I mean, that's just me. But yeah, it looks like 4th, 5th is probably the earliest you start to go with an interior offensive lineman. And I agree there. You guys want to do these grades for these interior guys? Add Skoronski, add Mauch?
Sure.
Okay. All right. I'll start while you guys are collecting your lists. Number 6, John Michael Schmitz. Number 5, Osiris Torrance. Number 4, Steve Avila. Number 3, Cody Mauch. Number 2, Joe Tippmann. Number 1, Peter Skoronski.
Go ahead, Craig, if you're ready.
Yeah. So my interior list is a little bit longer because I watched some more day 3 guards.
Oh yeah, I've got 15, but I didn't want to go through the whole list.
No worries. So I'll just throw this in here, just a couple extra names. So let's say it's a little uneven number, but it's fine. Number 11, I've got Juice Scruggs. 10, McClendon Curtis from Chattanooga. 9, that is, why is my screen doing this? Sorry, guys. Hold on. Let me move this over. What happened? Jarrett Patterson from Notre Dame. Sorry. 8, Antonio Mafi from UCLA. 7, Andrew Voorhees, USC. 6, Steve Avila, TCU. 5, Osiris Torrance from Florida. 4, Joe Tipman, Wisconsin. 3, Cody Mauch, North Dakota State. 2, John Michael Schmitz from Minnesota. 1, Peter Skronsky, Northwestern.
Jamie?
So let's see. I think this is number 6 is Osiris Torrance with a 68. Number 5 is Joe Tipman with a 70. John Michael Schmitz and Steve Avila are tied at number 4 with a 76. So I will put Avila at 4 and Schmitz at 3. And then I have Cody Mauch as my number 2 interior lineman with an 80, and Peter Skronsky as my number 1 with an 84.
Yeah. So we agree Skronsky's the best interior guy of this class. And Darnell Wright is our guy at tackle. Might not be the best in your guys' eyes. He is in mine. But still the guy we're all pretty high on. But when you look at this offensive line class, I mean, this is a bad offensive line class. It just feels like there's 10 guys that should be drafted in the first 2 days. And that feels very, very light.
That feels generous.
Yeah.
That's
the guys we covered is the 10 we mentioned.
Yep. And now we know why your contact said that there are a bunch of guys who are career backups who are going to be drafted in day 2, but shouldn't be.
And I agree.
And they didn't have any tackles on their list of interest. Of course, that had a lot to do with the fact that their tackles are pretty well set. Mm-hmm. And they only named a couple guards who they thought were worthy of a day 2 pick. So says a lot about what they think about this class.
Absolutely. I think after you get past that top 10, however you want to break that down, pretty much the 10 guys we named, after that, it's an absolute dart throw. You have to just hope to bank on a trade or 2. There is no sleeper that you think could get, I don't see really a guy that outside of maybe like 1 or 2 of these day 3 guys that we mentioned that could even be close to a starter in the NFL. I just think there's just so many holes in a lot of these guys' game. But yeah, Craig, how are you feeling about it as a whole?
The same. I think this solidifies what the actual needs are going into April and what they're going to be looking to attack. I don't foresee anything happening in any round before the 4th, like we talked about, as far as the offensive line is concerned, not just for need, but the level of talent that exists. Anything earlier than that essentially would be a reach unless a guy were to fall in a way that no one would expect. I mean, it's possible, but even still, it wouldn't be a good use of your draft capital there because you have other more pressing needs. So as far as the offensive line is concerned, it's a really good year to not need one. Otherwise, I think this would have been a much more depressing experience for us all. So we'd be thankful that for once, and I don't think any of us would imagine that we would be saying this 2 years ago. Thank God for Trey Pipkins.
Question mark. Yeah, totally. And by the way, that Notre Dame center you mentioned, Jarrett Patterson, that is a Telesco guy through and through.
Yeah,
absolute good guy off the field, captain of the offense. That's Notre Dame. That's a Telesco guy. All right. Well, I think we're good here. Thank you guys. Hour and 15 minutes later. We appreciate you guys sticking with us. Craig, this has been a pleasure. Look for us again next week around the same time, midweek, as we cover. Who are we covering next? Do we know? I can't remember.
It's an offensive position, maybe.
No, it's defensive line. It's defense.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, because we go offense, defense. Defensive line next week. Three of us will all be here. Appreciate you guys tuning in and sticking with us, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Craig, what's your sign off?
Salute.